The 9/11 conspiracies. Part 2 now of our discussion about the 9/11 conspiracies. And every time I mention 9/11, I always get emails from people, and no matter what I say back to them about these conspiracies being ludicrous, they always come up with different stories, different examples. So we're going through them. On one line, we have a conspiracy theorist, John Bursill, from the 9/11 Truth Movement in Australia, and also from the UK, Mike King, a conspiracy theory debunker and an expert in physics. Gentlemen, let me go to the allegation that there was a cover-up of evidence. First of all, to you, John Bursill. He doesn't like to be called a conspiracy theorist, but he does have some question marks over 9/11. John, was evidence covered up?
Absolutely. Well, lots of people in the fire brigade were very upset about the removal of evidence from the Twin Towers. The excuse there is that they wanted to clean it up as quick as possible. But obviously, in a massive two building collapses and the third tower, Building 7, all collapsing at near free-fall speed, you'd imagine that the engineering world would really want to do a thorough investigation. That definitely did not happen.
Mike King, the allegation that there was a cover-up of evidence post 9/11.
In the destruction of the buildings, obviously, there was a huge amount of destruction. You had to have a pile of rubble. The steel eventually was shipped off, and a great deal is made of this. But I don't believe that there was anything unusual or strange about the speed at which this was done.
Let me go to you, John Bursill. Why do some people think, why do you think that somehow that these buildings in New York were deliberately detonated?
Well, let's get something straight away, that nearly 2,000 building professionals, engineers, architects, structural engineers think that these buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. The vast majority of people that looked into the information believe that. Building 7 is such an obvious controlled demolition that it's laughable that someone who was an expert in physics would say that it wasn't. It actually falls for 2.2 seconds of its fall, 100 feet or 32 metres at absolute free fall without any resistance at all, as if there was nothing below. If there was just the mass of the building without any structural strength, it would still not travel.
Okay, so somehow somebody got explosives into all of those buildings, the two main towers and also Building 7. Is that what you're saying?
Well, all we know is that they had the access. We've done a lot of research about who had access to the buildings and the people that were in charge of security, and the same names keep popping up time and time again. There was a lift renovation of the Twin Towers for the 9 months prior to 9/11 that gave access to the core structure of the building. Building 7 was a government building. It was owned by Larry Silverstein, but it had the CIA's New York office, the FBI office. There was lots of important documentation and government people inside that building. Now, how they facilitated its destruction is not known. Of course, it's not known. We need a proper investigation. That's why the victims' families in the Remember Building 7 campaign, you can just Google that and you'll see the evidence there. Remember Building 7. The victims' families are calling out for an investigation into Building 7.
Okay, Mike King, you say you've got a lot of evidence on your website how this couldn't have happened, but tell me, how would they, and I'm probably giving you a free goal here, but how would people have possibly got all of these explosives, enough to bring down all of those towers into those buildings? How would they have done it?
Well, again, going to one of the top American industry experts in controlled demolition, who's brought down thousands of buildings, his point is that to prepare a building for controlled demolition is an incredibly lengthy task and requires an army of people, and would be absolutely impossible to have done it without ordinary people, workers in those buildings who are not government stooges. You've got thousands of just ordinary people who go in and work there, whether they're cleaners or office workers, finding really bizarre things going on and wondering about it. And some of those people would have come forward. So his point is to prepare a building for controlled demolition takes an incredible amount of preparation, and there's absolutely no sign of that at all.
Let me go back to John Bursill. John, one of the things that many conspiracy theorists say are that there are way too many coincidences around the time of the attacks. What are you talking about?
Well, there's many coincidences, like those protocols being changed just prior to 9/11, like Larry Silverstein buying into the Twin Towers and making $4.6 billion just prior to the events, just lucking in there on a massive insurance policy. Like FEMA arriving, the Federal Emergency Management Agency arriving the day before 9/11 with a 100-plus strong emergency workforce ready to go with equipment for a drill. Like the fact that the 6 days prior to 9/11, 285 times the put options were put down on American and United Airlines, that billions and billions of dollars were made out of knowledge that something was going to happen to those towers and American Airlines. Now, it's just absolutely crazy to think that that's possible, that could just happen. The fact that the American military were ready to go into Afghanistan had already warned the Taliban they were coming in. They just needed the pretext. The fact that it was spelled out so clearly in the Project for the New American Centuries Doctrine, rebuilding America's defences, that's just the start. There's literally thousands of these coincidences.
All right, let's go to Mike King, I suppose. Mike King, I don't expect you to respond to all of them because there are a lot of them, but I suppose in general you'd say if there are coincidences, they are coincidences.
Yes. I mean, my own expertise is in the field of physics, so exactly what happens with the American military and all these things,
sure.
I'm much less qualified to pass comment on. But if people do look at my papers on the website, there's two guys, Professor Stephen Jones and David Chandler, who've worked out, what looks initially like a very plausible account of the blowing up of the Twin Towers of controlled demolition. But I've taken them point by point, and I think the physics I've used is very secure and a thoughtful, careful look at this, I think, will show that it was absolutely impossible that it was controlled demolition, and that the collapse is actually explicable very much on the events that we know and on the evidence we know.
Okay, one last question for both of you. John Bursill, to you first of all, and this is one that I've said to people who've also written to me over the years saying, look, man didn't land on the moon, and I just say, look, apart from all the physical evidence, you can argue all that sort of stuff. I mean, for something like this to be carried off, and let's look at 9/11, there would be way too many people who would have to be in on the act. What do you say to that, John?
Okay, well, it's got a great understanding that the American government, after World War II and building up to World War II with the Manhattan Project and other projects, are the masters of compartmentalisation, where it's a need-to-know basis only with people. And with, say, for instance, if we were rigging the Twin Towers, certain aspects of it could appear completely innocuous to people, exactly what was happening. And the people that have done detailed research that are into geopolitics and looking at these dark forces inside the deep state of America say that maybe only 200 people would actually have to be aware of the full operation.
Okay, but 200 people are still a lot of people.
Yeah, they are, but they're all complicit to murder, and they've all got interests, and they all made money from 9/11. Now, people do some terrible things. A million people have died worldwide with the war on terror. That's a terrible thing. The government, the American elements of the American government like doing these sorts of terrible things because it's good for their power, it's good for their bottom line. But if we just think about the compartmentalisation idea, and we also imagine that the people on that plane, about half of them, were government people. Now, there's all sorts of way of tidying up the loose ends, and American have done it previous. Operation Northwoods, they planned to attack their own country to go into Cuba. It was signed off on by all the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other intelligence agencies inside America. The only thing that stopped that, and they included hijacking of planes and blowing up of people and buildings and all sorts of things inside America based on an attack in Cuba, was only stopped because John F. Kennedy said no.
Okay, let me go to Mike King just for a response on that. Even by John's estimation there, Mike King, the idea that 200 people might be involved, surely one of those people are going to come out and say, hey, I've got a story to tell.
I agree with that, the actual cash available to somebody who'd want to spill the beans, and also the police protection available to them if they were to do that, will be enormously tempting. I mean, if Nixon couldn't get away with his Watergate, and even the president gets impeached, I think I would simply say have more faith in human nature and less faith in the competence of governments to do stuff like this.
All right. Well, look, despite the fact that you both have different views on this, I've found the conversation fascinating, and thank you both for coming on this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Good on you. There's John Bursill from the 9/11 Truth Movement in Australia, who has some conspiracies on 9/11, and also Mike King, a bloke who debunks conspiracy theories and an expert in physics.